Did Elon sell X to himself? Yeah, I think I have a clip coming out about it, but he sold X.com to himself, to X.ai. He sold it to a different company that he owns. So now the problem is on that company, but that company is much bigger and much easier to raise money for. It's really not that crazy. Isn't that a wash sale? No. The only people who could reasonably complain about this are if you are an investor in XAI and you're like, hey, why are we buying Twitter for this much money? But nobody complained because they just go along with Elon. It's like insider trading. It's not even public company. Regular people are not losing from this deal. So I don't feel bad about it. I don't care. If I bought this book for $45 billion and you're like, wow, you got hosed on that deal. That was dumb. And I go, nuh-uh. And then I buy it from myself for $45 billion. See? Look, it was all good. You know what I'm saying? I'm not screwing you over. It's a little silly, but it doesn't get rid of the problems. It just moves it. I just don't think it's a big deal. Like I have no problem with him doing it. And I certainly don't care about like the Saudi prince who might lose money investing in X.ai. You know, like I don't care. Do you think the inflated valuation could have something to do with his scheme to screw over Sam Altman's valuation you mentioned a couple weeks ago? So his X.ai valuation, XAI, and this is X, right? This is Twitter. This one worth what, like 90 billion? This one worth like 45. Now these numbers are essentially made up. Like Elon can say they're worth whatever they want. Well, for this one, unless you sell it to regular people. It's like, okay, imagine I own a banana farm. Let's go balloons here. Imagine I'm holding a banana, okay? I should have said glasses because I'm holding, this is a banana, okay? But I wanted to go, if I go to the town market and I set up a stall to sell bananas and I sell it for $30 billion and nobody buys it, it's very obvious that that's not what the banana is worth. But if I am selling the banana to myself between my two companies, I can say it's worth whatever it wants. X.ai is worth something around $90 billion. Like this, because he's selling it to this, he can say it's worth whatever it wants. But this value has some basis in fact, because it's like Shark Tank, right? He goes out to the market and says, I'm gonna sell 10% of this company for $9 billion. That's at a $90 billion valuation. Now, if somebody buys that, that indicates to everybody that this valuation is real. I'm not sure if he raised a round at 90 billion, but he has raised rounds at a high valuation for XAI. People have bought in, assuming this is worth a lot. The area where it's like, shady's not even the right word, but the area where it's like kind of silly is that nobody has done that for X. He is just doing it. He's just buying it and saying it's worth 45 billion so that everybody who bought in early to help him buy it gets made whole. They all get XAI shares. He needed to get that off his back, and he needed to get like the Saudi prince and Sequoia Capital and Morgan Stanley and all the banks that help him buy Twitter. They need to get their money back or get like a better option than Twitter. And so now they have X.ai. They got all shares in X.ai, which is working. Is there a personal financial incentive to do this if Twitter is losing money? But now under XAI, yeah, 100%. Okay, imagine I have two companies, right? I have a lemonade stand and I own Google. Okay. Imagine the lemonade stand's doing poorly. I'm spending way more on materials than I am on selling the cups of lemonade. It's losing money. It'd be kind of embarrassing if that lemonade stand failed, right? So what I do is I use my ownership of Google to buy the lemonade stand out at full price. And now, even if the lemonade stand's doing badly, it's kind of small in the scale of Google. X.ai is much bigger and much higher valued. So they're just using that inflated expectation to buy out his less successful company and just be done with the problem there. Does X.ai get the debt too? Yes. Again, the problem hasn't gone away. That's why it's not like he magically made the problem go away. He just put it into a much bigger company that can absorb it better. And look, if the AI bubble goes down, or if investors are like, hey, I really don't want to buy any shares of X.ai at a 90 billion valuation, or he can't go public with it, the whole thing blows up anyway. Did you see Newsmax stocks went up 1,300%? I did see that. Newsmax IPO'd and had the most successful IPO that I've seen since 2013 or something. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if they priced themselves really low at the IPO or what. What does that put its value at? $20 billion? No way. What does this make? Newsmax revenue. Dude, it loses money. Wait a minute. This company loses $27 million in a quarter, and it's worth $20 billion? Is it incredibly high growth? Newsmax valuation soars in MAGA media boom. Okay, so it's worth more than Rumble and the Trump Media and Technology Group. It's double the value of the New York Times, which made $106 million in profit. That is so odd. It doesn't make any money. Yeah, it had revenue of 80 million and expenses of what? 135 million. So it lost 55 and now it's valued near 20 bill. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Isn't it normal for IPOs to be insanely overvalued? It's definitely less rare in the early days of a company, especially like a bubbly, buzzy, hot company, to be overvalued early and then fall off. But I didn't think of Newsmax as like a AI tech startup, you know? I thought of it as like part of an overall dying media industry. Don't all IPOs pop every couple months? No, many have failed. So if you guys don't know, I briefly had a Big A book club where I recommended a book and the book was so dry that I killed the book club instantly. And it was called As Gods Among Men. But the book was actually very interesting. As Gods Among Men are about a brief history of the rich in the West. And it's basically the top 0.001%. It looks at them from like medieval times till now. The premise is very interesting. You guys are saying but it's actually very interesting. He doesn't say, and I don't say, that it's a good thing to have a super rich 0.1% class. Okay? Do you understand? Saying that at the beginning. But it did exist and it does exist. Okay? So let's analyze it. In history, especially in like 15, 16, 1700s, there was almost a social contract where the very wealthy would be tentatively allowed by the mob to have that level of wealth, but only because in times of crisis or in times of peace, they would spend huge gobs of that money to either rapidly beautify and improve their living area, like the city they live in or for like defense and things like that, whenever like things were threatened. The idea that if you have that level of wealth or power or connection, you have to use it for the good of society in some way. Now, again, it's hard to measure that and yada, 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 but he does a good job of looking at it. And basically in any measurable way, the amount that people have actually sort of quote unquote given back has plummeted. And the rich today are not only more rich, but more uniquely selfish. And it's because they no longer see themselves as part of their city, their town, their country. They see themselves as basically global citizens. They are like part of a global super rich class. The people that are closest to them are fellow billionaires in a different country. They don't see themselves as like, I'm a rich American. I need to make Chicago better. It's a powerful, interesting book. And it just feels like that social contract that has existed that has allowed perhaps this level of wealth to exist in the past, even in like a more equal time in America where we like 50s, 60s, 70s, where we still had very rich people, they would be more willing to put that back to their society. And it doesn't exist anymore. That's like the overall thesis of the book, if I were to say. But also, there's actually a second part of the book. There's a second part of the book. The second part of the book is he looked at inequality data for all of human history, everywhere he could find it, top to bottom, high and low, in countries, in communist countries, in capitalist countries, in feudalist countries, everywhere. And he noticed this: no matter what, in every country at all times, inequality slowly ticks up. Essentially, it essentially always, except for war, famine, plague. Those are like the times where inequality like breaks down. Like inequality is like this, and then World War II plummets. So much destroyed, so much is reset, so many rules get rewritten, taxes raised on the rich, everything starts over. Okay, and after World War II. This period, this 50s, this is only in the West, by the way, we're talking about the West. 50s, 60s, 70s period is like the longest period almost ever, in human history, of like a steady, low inequality middle class. And the reason they maintained it and it didn't keep rising is because in this period, we had this unique confluence of factors. Like we had high top tax rates for the rich, we had high union participation, we had well-regulated banking rules. After around 71, starts to rise again. And then after Reagan, it goes crazy, right? It's just worth noting this part of history is like really cool. And I think a lot of what I talk about is like, what was so unique about that part? How do we get back to there without necessarily World War III? What were the unique policies at the time that like we've lived through in America? in normal America. Like, you have parents that were alive in this time. It wasn't that crazy a time. Well, how do we get back there? I just want to, like, this is my big theme for a lot of what I talk about. The effective tax rate wasn't really much higher though. Almost comparable today. I've heard this argument. I'll be honest with you. I find it to be specious. If I'm going to use my fancy term. I think if we're so confident that there's no difference with the high marginal tax rates and the current ones, then let's just go back to them and there's no difference, right? I find it, let's just do it then. Let's just go back to the time and then they'll be fine. But people always say like, who cares? They didn't really pay that much anyway. Okay, fine. Then let's do the, you know what I'm saying? It feels like an excuse to not do it is my first point. And my second point, and I think this is really important, what I've been trying to talk more about lately, we have a real problem, especially lately, with enforcement. We don't even enforce the tax rules we currently have. I don't even care what percent it is, you're not paying it. People aren't paying it. And that's almost worse than all because it creates this rot of trust where, well, if that guy's not paying, I'm not gonna pay mine. You know what I'm saying? It's like the rules being unfair or too low on rich people is one thing, but even them not paying, just ignoring the rules, that's a real cancerous, you know, it's the hardest thing to get people to support, but I always support it and I try to make the case every time. I made it during Biden, I'll make it now. I want more IRS funding and agents. I want, especially on the high-end white collar crime, rich tax evasion, and I want a simpler tax code. Yeah, I want simpler tax code and I want uniform enforcement. And I think, again, a lot of that will just help bring trust back to the collective system. Someone said really cool for black people in the 50s and 70s. And listen, I think that's a common argument, but I think it's a little bit silly to say that the reason we had racism in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is because the middle class was so big or that we were taxing the rich. If we get rid of the taxes on the rich, that will get rid of racism. Do you understand? I think that's a little bit crazy. I think there's a social timeline and an economic timeline, and they are related, but you can have one without the other. You could stay this spot on the social timeline and then go to this spot on the economic one. I think that's fine. I don't think that's a problem. And in fact, you can make a very strong case that the booming economy and widespread growing middle class of the 50s, 60s, 70s is what created the space for the civil rights movements. There was more progress in those 20 years on civil rights than there were in 100 years before that, and often in 20 years after. What if we defund the IRS and ask corporations to do their own taxes, but they have to be honest? Holy that could work. Wait a minute. An honor system. Like when your teacher tells you to grade your own work, you guys always follow the honor system, right? You always grade it as harshly as you should. Any ever work from home? It's like when you're working from home, you're always working all 8 hours. You never take a break or take a nap or get a snack, or you always work all 8 because you don't want to rob your employer. We should have companies grade each other's taxes. That's actually fire, dude. Pepsi should grade Coke's taxes. That's actually such a good idea. Mark that down.